crisis is something that is being fought against on a war footing from the central government. There is a committee which is tracking how much coal is being produced and can it be sent to states that have a greater need. Meanwhile, there are reports of certain number of power outages in some states as capacity is still not as much as is required. Increased demand is one of the big reasons for this. So what is being done by the government to ensure that there is sufficient coal and no shortage or no blackout? My colleague Prakash caught up with the Coal Minister Pralhad Joshi for this exclusive conversation.
बहुत ज़्यादा बारिश के कारण इंटरनेशनल प्राइस जो बहुत ज़्यादा एकदम ज़बरदस्त ज़्यादा हो गया और पावर डिमांड अचानक बढ़ गए. 30% ऑफ द प्रोडक्शन इंपोर्टेड बाय पावर प्लांट का हम अभी आपूर्ति कर रहे हैं. वी आर ट्राइंग टू फिल द गैप. तो वो एक कारण है. हमारा 24% ज़्यादा हुआ है. 24% ऑफ द टोटल जनरेशन हैज बीन इंक्रीज. एंड ऑल्सो आई वुड लाइक टू टेल, एंड इन स्पाइट ऑफ दैट our coal production has continuously, we are increasing it, and because of rain supply was hampered for a few days, and that's why it is depleted. Stock has come down, and but I am assuring you through you to the country that our coal supply, whatever demand is there now at present, the demand from the power sector according to Power Ministry is around 1.9 they want. We are supplying that, and from 21st they want, after 20th we have committed them 2 million per day, million ton per day. That also will supply. That will start adding to the stock.
अच्छा, कई स्टेट्स जो हैं, करीब 11 से ज़्यादा स्टेट्स हैं जो इस बात का लगातार कह रहे हैं कि उनके यहाँ पावर शॉर्टेज है, उनके पावर प्लांट्स के पास कोल नहीं है. लगातार वो सरकार से इंटरवीन करने की मांग कर रहे हैं. तो क्या सच में स्थिति ऐसी है या फिर राज्य जो है एक माहौल बना रहे हैं कि उनके पास इस तरह की शॉर्टेज है?
बीच में तो जैसे आपने कहा 4 दिन का 3 दिन का हुआ है, आज भी है, लेकिन कोई भी प्लांट हम पहले भी कह चुके थे कि आप कृपया स्टॉक करो, क्योंकि रेनी सीजन में हम सप्लाई, हमारे पास 100 मिलियन टन का स्टॉक था और हमको कंटिन्यूअसली वी आर ट्राइंग टू रिक्वेस्ट द स्टेट्स टू बिल्ड द स्टॉक, बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली दैट वाज नॉट हैपनिंग, एंड सम स्टेट्स दे रिक्वेस्टेड अस not to supply the coal. That is in June. See, if I say the name of the state, then it will become politics. I don't want to do at this point of time. But there are states who requested us not to send the coal, not to supply. And it is in spite of that we are giving credit, and those states have to give thousands of crores to us. In spite of that, we are ready to supply because we have produced and kept it. And in September, I think in February, March, the stocked coal, because it was too huge, 100 million ton was too huge, it got fire. Because as it is, if you keep the coal like that, fire will catch it. So that also happened. But in spite of that, now I'm not interested in blame game. But I am committed to supply 2 million ton.
तो स्थिति कब तक सुधर जाएगी, हम क्या उम्मीद करें?
एक सप्ताह में सुधर जाएगा, क्योंकि आज भी हम 1.94 मिलियन टन हम सप्लाई किया है. आज भी वो कंटिन्यू होगा, कल भी कंटिन्यू होगा, और 21st 22nd से 2 बिलियन टन होगा. तब से स्थिति 100% सुधर जाएगी.
सर, एक आखिरी क्वेश्चन, क्या क्योंकि आपने कोल ऑक्शन के 3rd ट्रांच की शुरुआत की है, तो जो मौजूदा माहौल है कोल की डिमांड, आप भी कह रहे हैं कि 40 साल तक कोल की स्थिति रहने वाली है, कोल की डिमांड रहेगी, और जो स्थिति हम देख रहे हैं, हम रिन्यूएबल की बात कर रहे थे, अचानक कोल शॉर्टेज की बात हो रही है, तो क्या ये एक इन्वेस्टर्स के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से कंपनियों के लिए एक बेहतर समय है कि वो आए इसमें?
नहीं, मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि दीज आर दी सी, मैंने ये कहा कि we cannot, without coal we cannot further. हमको रिन्यूएबल भी चाहिए. रिन्यूएबल भी अगर हम 50% हम रिन्यूएबल से भी उत्पन्न करते हैं तो 50% कोल चाहिए, और हमारा डिमांड बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ रहा है, इसीलिए डिपेंडेंसी ऑन बिल कोल बेर फॉर 40 years. दिस इज व्हाट आई हैव सेड.
All right, Aurodeep, Nandi and Madan Sabnavis with us on the show to speak about what the impact of the coal crisis is. Thank you to both of you for joining us today. Aurodeep, let me begin with you. Now, let's keep aside for a minute whether there is a shortage, how big the shortage is, what states are saying, what center is saying. Let's not get into it. Let's look at the impact of what we're seeing right now. By all accounts, we're in the middle of a fairly robust recovery after the second wave. And then you have perhaps a few hours of load shedding, power outages, and a higher cost of power for factories, for manufacturing. What is the kind of impact it has?
Good evening, Tamanna. And you're absolutely right. Not only are we exiting out of the second wave, but there's also evidence of some of this momentum being lost just after the rapid increases happened over June and July. In fact, we just had a few hours back the industrial production data for August, and when we crunched the numbers, what we came across was that while industrial production was touching pre-pandemic levels in July, it sort of again dipped a little below it in August. So there is a certain fatigue that is there in the system. Now, on the top of this power crisis can impact the economy broadly in a couple of ways. One is the more immediate impact that you talked of, which is that you want to produce something and there's no power, right? So there will be that kind of arrest on growth if these power cuts really start to bite. Around over 40% of India's power is consumed essentially by industry, a big chunk by then domestic people as well as commercial establishments, around 17 to 20% by agriculture. So, a huge amount of the economy depends on power. And in fact, power consumption and GDP growth have a decent amount of co-movement in them. But the second aspect, and this is a slightly medium-term aspect, is the fact that energy prices are likely to rise, because how are these power plants going to replenish themselves unless there is there's coal production that increases? Whatever you're going to do now for the immediate term, you would probably need to buy coal from abroad. Now, coal prices globally are quite high because you've got China, you've got Europe in similar formats of this problem. And so this will inevitably lead to higher energy prices. In fact, we've already seen the average price of electricity in the power exchange shoot up to record highs. In fact, the average in October is around 160% higher than what we saw in September, and this will filter into to consumers. Now, mind you, the consumer has been facing a barrage of these inflationary shocks going up to past 2 years, right? We've had higher global commodity prices, higher petrol prices, higher LPG cylinder prices, and all of these have been filtering through, and you've had one after the other of these shocks come in. Even now, it's not just electricity prices that are going up. Natural gas prices are going up, so LPG cylinder prices have been raised. Crude oil prices have gone up. So from a consumer perspective, this does bite the balance sheet. And I think sort of going forward, once the euphoria of the festive season, and the government spending, and there are a number of tailwinds currently. So, you've got the festive season, you've got government coming in to spend, and you've got easy conditions. But I do worry about the state of the Indian consumer.
Sure. Absolutely, and we're talking about it on a very timely day, because retail inflation numbers were out today, and in September it's fallen to 4.35%. So on the face of it, it looks like the inflation problem is under control. Madan Sabnavis, does it seem like the inflation problem is under control, or is worse round the corner, especially in the context of what Aurodeep was just talking about, that a coal shortage eventually, one way or the other, means higher prices for energy?
In fact, I think the inflation numbers which have come out today are slightly ambivalent. Ambivalent in the sense that coming down to 4.3% to my mind is more because of the statistical phenomenon, as well as the fact that we have seen prices of food articles, the inflation of food articles come down. And we have this anomaly in the system where it shows the vegetable prices have crashed. But believe me, in the last 15 days, if you go to the marketplace, we've seen onion prices going up. Virtually all vegetable prices have gone up. So I think it's more of a statistic. Now, this said about the food inflation part, I think we have a problem on hand because we've already seen this concept, the component of fuel and lighting, which has already shown a double-digit growth. And today, when we're talking in terms of the coal shortage, it is definitely going to lead to an increase in our lighting costs. And I think inflation, which maybe numerically may be within the comfort level, to my mind, it's very likely that it will start moving up once the base effect wears off. So I think it is definitely a concern for us, though not immediately in the next couple of months. But one should hope that the problem which we have on coal is more temporary or transient in nature because of these supply-demand mismatches, and a solution will be found soon. I'm more worried actually on the production side, which Aurodeep has also said, because this is a festival time. And just when we think that industry has come out of the rut, it looks like that there should not be a slippage only because we don't have enough power, or maybe the cost of power of them.
Aurodeep, explain how we are going to tide over this medium-term crisis. Now, we're having statements coming in almost on a daily basis from the central government, from the coal ministry, from the states as well, saying that they're trying to tide over the crisis. But how exactly is this going to happen? Because coal production cannot shoot up overnight. Do we have enough stock and just need to redistribute it better? Or do we eventually have to go and buy coal which could be as high as $200 a ton?
So Tamanna, I think the sort of key word is demand-supply mismatch. So it's not just about supply in isolation. It's both demand and supply, right? Now, part of this is going to self-correct, hopefully, right? And that part is that the reason you've had a crunch on coal production has been because there've been rains that have kind of impeded the mining, and now you're no longer in the monsoon season, so you should have some of that production come back. Secondly, on the demand side, typically the summer months call for higher consumption of power. So to some extent, from a seasonality perspective, you should expect probably a little lesser power demand in the second half than it is on the first. So from that perspective, I think there is going to be some more breathing space than what we've seen so far. But having said that, look, power consumption this year, right? The average power consumption which India is doing every week is much higher than what it was last year and even the year before. So, and given the fact that we are again, in this kind of time where we are getting out of a second wave, vaccination is pace is picking up, we are normalizing the economy, where government spending is going to start entering into the system, plus you've got festive demand. So there should be a power demand also within the system. Now, at the end of the day, you're absolutely right, because it's not like they'll just start producing. Whatever steps you take now won't lead to an overproduction the very next day. It will take some time. The inevitable consequence of this is that, yes, you've got to import coal. And once you do that, once you try to bridge that demand-supply gap, then you will have to contend higher coal prices, which leads to higher electricity prices, and that then filters down to higher tariffs that you and I pay. So I think that's sort of the way probably that this will get this will sort itself through. But again, I think power is a really important part of the economy. I don't think the government would really allow endemic power cuts. So there is a certain sense of urgency to solving this crisis.
Yeah. So, Madan, are you optimistic that this is not going to last long, and what we're seeing right now is short-lived? So, for example, if Punjab is imposing 3 hours of power cuts per day, it's still October 13th. Perhaps in the next 15-20 days, things should ease out?
realistic about this entire situation. While we'll all hope to think that the demand supply is a temporary mismatch, which I said even earlier and would correct, but I think individual states will actually have to assess the situation. And if need be, we need to import coal. But I think we need to have a kind of a trade-off between, do we need power supply to be running on par with what it was earlier, or are we worried more about the cost of power? I think both of them are important, but I would just draw an analogy to the kind of prices we normally have on pulses in terms of onions. But when we get up and start to import, it should not be too late. So even here, I think we're in a critical phase. We are going to have the Rabi serving starting. So we do require power for agriculture. We require power for industry. And of course, households will be the third category. In China, we have seen definitely that they've decided to cut power for households and give reference to industry. Hopefully, we won't be reaching this situation. But I think there needs to be a pragmatic assessment done, because I think we've heard two parts: the government saying there's enough coal, the state saying we're not getting the coal. So I think we have to be pragmatic in this. Decide what the problem is, and if I think we need to go ahead and import. Because even imports is not going to be easy. It's not just a cost.
One last point, Aurodeep. In the Indian context, what would be the priority? In the Indian context, what would be the priority? If push comes to shove, will households be prioritized over industry?
I think that's sort of a tough call to say at this point. Look. It's not like the inventories have run out. The inventories are dangerously low, and you are in a situation where production should be picking up, and the demand should be comparatively lower than the first half. The situation of one being substituted for other might seem a little stark at this point. So look, if there are power cuts, I think it's going to start impacting not just households but also industries. We are also in a kind of work from home situation, so the people who are working from home will get impacted either ways. I think it's going to be more broad based.
Yeah, with the work from home situation, very rightly so, you need to have that power out, because then the impact will be double. That household will also suffer, that company or that organization will also suffer. Thank you so much, Aurodeep and Madan, for joining us on this continuous coverage while we talk about this energy crisis that India is facing. But it's not just India, all over the world there is an energy crisis brewing, and we've seen this impact the prices of commodities all over. No wonder crude is at a high, hovering above $80 a barrel. Natural gas prices have shot up over 500% since the start of the year in Europe. My colleagues Kritika Arora and Ruchi Bhatia bring you this report.
Long lines at petrol pumps in UK and gas stations running dry display the extent of the global energy crisis impacting the world. In Europe, natural gas prices have surged 500% in the past year. In China, rolling blackouts are hitting industry and even homes. And in India, several states are warning of load shedding due to the dwindling supplies. Lebanon was also reportedly facing blackouts as the country's two biggest power stations shut down in early October.
If you look back to the stimulus packages that came through and the resurgence in Asian economies, especially at a time when we already had some shortages in energy, and it also feeds into the questions around energy transition, because many of these economies now have diversifying more into wind, into solar, and these have more unreliable systems, and secondly, they don't have the same storage levels and storage resources to back up energy grids, electricity grids, in the way, for example, say oil works, and the amount of oil we have in storage. And oil, if we can take it by a comparison, oil, for example, has built in from the 73-74 Arab oil embargo and the IEA mandating that OECD countries have 90 days worth of storage. Oil has built in those redundancies, and if you look at where in, for example, other fossil fuels, gas and coal and renewables, it doesn't have the same buffers in place.
A rapid recovery in economic activity coinciding with widespread vaccination has led to demand for sources of energy zooming, and the prices have followed. Australia's Newcastle thermal coal, a global benchmark, is trading at $202 a metric ton, 3 times higher than the end of 2019. European natural gas prices have soared by almost 500% in the past year, up 130% since just September. In United States, natural gas prices are the highest in 13 years, and crude oil prices are already sitting steady at above $80 a barrel.
The situation is likely to get aggravated in the next few months as more and more energy would be needed to light and heat homes, and impact of energy crisis will hit all sectors and activities, from milking machine of cows to manufacture of toys.
In China, people in the Guangdong province have been asked to stop using elevators below the 3rd floor. The factory of the world getting hit means supplies of everything from semiconductors to phones will be impacted. Meanwhile, in Europe, fertilizer companies have increased prices, which will hit output and increase food inflation. With Kritika Arora, this is Ruchi Bhatia for ET Now.